In this video, I'll be showing you how to make a basic pencil skirt. So I'm going to be measuring my waist now. My waist is 7 inches. I'm going to be adding an additional 1 inch for that, and then 1 inch for sewing allowance. Then I measure my waist to hip. I'm going to put up the measurements on the screen. My waist to hip is 9.5, and that is 10 inches. I mark there and I join the points. So after marking my waist to hip, on that line I measure my hip measurement, which is 9.5. Then I add 1 inch allowance just for sewing, and then I join my waist to my hip. So what I'm going to be measuring now is the whole length of my skirt, and I usually make sure to add a 1 inch sewing allowance because I'm going to be joining the top and then hemming the bottom. And then once I do that, I'm going to measure my hip measurement, which is 10.5, and then subtract 1.5 from that and measure it at the bottom so it gives a pencil shape. So that's basically how I do my pencil skirt, and I join my hip to the length of my skirt. Now I make sure to cover out my hip area, so when I cut it out it doesn't come out sharp, and also when I sew it, it doesn't come out sharp. And then once I'm done with that, I cut out the front piece of my pencil skirt. Now once I'm done with this, I'm going to be using this to cut out the back piece as well. So I place it on the fabric again, as you can see right here, leave 1 inch allowance for my zip, and then I cut it out. And after cutting out the pattern, I open up the zip allowance portion. This is basically how I do my skirt measurement, or my skirt pattern rather. So after cutting it out, now I go ahead and construct my darts using my bust points measurement, so it aligns properly. So my dart measurement is 3.5, plus I usually add 1/8 of an inch allowance, so that by the time I sew the sides, it adjusts itself properly to my. Remember, my dart is 1 inch, so 1/2 inch on both sides, and then I join and then transfer my darts to the other fabric, to the other piece of the front and then the back as well. So once I'm done, I'm going to sew my darts, and I usually make sure that the lines are aligned properly, so I don't have any excesses, or so my dart is not sort of looking funny. And make sure it is tapered as you go along. Just follow the line that you've created, making sure that it is aligned properly. So this is how I sew my dart, and my dart length for my skirt is from my waist to hip. You can make yours shorter anyways. So the next thing I'm going to be doing now, after constructing my dart, this is it. This is the front piece. I've done the front and the back. The next thing I'm going to do now is to attach my zip to the back portion. So I've changed to my zipper foot. If you've watched all my videos on how I sew in my zip, this is how I do it. So there are other ways of attaching zip in which the zip is not visible. For mine, the zip is always visible. So that's why I use a matching zip. I mark my 1 inch allowance. Then the stopper on the zipper is a guide as to where I want to attach my zip. So I use that to sew my zip from the waist down to 1 inch away from the bottom. Sorry, 1.5 inches away from the bottom of my zip. This is such that I'll be able to join the other side properly. So I do this and do the same thing for the other side. And then once I'm done, I close up my zip, and this is it right here, so that I'll be able to join the rest of the piece down to where I want it to stop. So I just fold it back and then start from where I stopped. Make sure I back stitch, and then I sew all the way down to where I want my slit to begin. So your slit can be 8 inches away from the bottom of your skirt. Just make sure you note that. So once I'm done with that, yeah, this is how my slit looks. The next thing I'm going to do is now take the front piece and back piece together, place them right sides facing, and then I'm going to be sewing with my allowance. Remember, I gave 1 inch allowance on my skirt, so I'm going to be sewing all the way down. I always make sure I measure so that I don't have any excesses or deficits, sort of thing. So at the end of the day, actually the skirt actually fits me without making any other adjustments using this method. Just make sure your cutting is proper and everything. And when you're sewing, once you get to the hip, just follow the line, follow your hip curve, and then sew all the way down. So after sewing my skirt, I'm going to be cutting a peplum for this skirt. My previous video, I showed you how to cut flare, full flare actually. So for this measurement, I use 6 inches all the way down from the that apex, the folded part, and I measure it. I actually wanted to have excess, so I'll be doing pleats with that. So that's 11, and my waist measurement is 7. So I mark 8.5 inches all the way down for the length of the peplum, and then I'm going to cut it out after a joining point. So the 4 inches extra that I have, I'm going to be using it to do some knife pleats and kissing pleats on the peplum. So after cutting it out, I open it up and notch the points, the folded sides, both top and bottom, because I want to demarcate where the front piece of the peplum will be and the back piece. So I demarcate the peplum, open it up, and then join the notches top to bottom with my chalk. Now this will give me one side front and one side back piece, and then I fold along the other side as well. So now along one side of the notched area is my front, along the other side is my back, and I pin so the fabric doesn't shift. Now once I do that, I'm going to, for the back portion, I'm going to be doing more or less like a gradual increase in length from the folded area. So I notch it as well again because I'm going to be cutting that open, and I want to know where to pin to my skirt. So once I notch it, I'm going to cut the peplum. So I have the area where the zip will be is shorter, and it is graduated all the way down to the front of the peplum. So this is what I have. I cut it open because of my zipper panel. Now I'm going to be using this satin bias as a style detail for the skirt. So the satin bias, I'm not going to be using it, it's not going to be on the inside, it's going to be on the outside of the peplum. So what I do is, now the first thing I do is to create a curve at the edge and then cut it out. This is because I want the satin bias to sort of like curve around that area. So I'm going to start sewing from the point I'll be joining to my skirt at the top. Now the right side of my bias is touching the wrong side of my fabric, so that by the time I turn it, the bias will show on the right side. So I sew on the crease of the bias all the way down. Now because satin bias is stretchy, you have to be careful when you're sewing on fabric. It's very stretchy, quite alright. So after doing that, I cut the excess bias and then fold it in and then sew on the right side of my bias. The curved area is quite tricky, so you actually have to maneuver your way through that portion, and once you've done that, then all the rest is pretty easy. So this is how it's going to look on my skirt, and I actually use a satin bias because it is shiny. So I'm all done with my peplum. Now the next thing I'm going to be doing is attaching the notched parts. Now this notched part goes to the center, and I pin the side notch to the side seam of the skirt, and then the other end to the zipper area, making sure I fold my zipper in and then pin as well. I do the same thing to the other side as well. So I have now separated my front piece, my side piece, and my back piece. This will enable me evenly distribute the pleats around the pleats on the peplum around the skirt. So once I've done that, this is how it's going to look pinned properly. I've pinned it zip to zip all the way around. So now from the side, that's the side, that's the front piece, the middle front piece, or my center front, let me put it that way, the other side, and then the back piece. So I open my zipper to enable me to do this pleat properly. So now I'm going to be pleating about 2 inches, and I make sure it is aligned on my dart line. I use my dart line as a guide, so it is evenly spread out. So it is 2 inches by 2 inch. It is folded 2 inches, so that gives us 4 inches, right? Then I move to the side, to the front rather. I'll be pleating on the dart as well. So for the front piece, I pleat by 1 inch. I do my knife pleat of 1 inch. So now that's another 2 inch. That's 2 inches gone. The other one is, the back piece is 4 inches. I move to the other side of the front, do it on the dart again. 1 inch knife pleat, so that's another 2 inches because it is folded. I go to the front and do this, the center front. I remove the pin and do a kissing pleat of 1 inch by 1 inch. So 1 inch on one side, 1 inch on one side. About that amount, and then I pin. This is to make sure that my pleats are evenly distributed. And then I do the same for the back. For the back is going to be 2 inches because the other side was 2 inches, so that's 4 inches. So if you calculate with my measurements on the peplum when I was cutting, you realize that I have an excess of about 16 inches, and it worked really fine for me. Everything was evenly distributed. So now I'm going to go to my machine and sew the peplum on the fabric, on the skirts that is already made. So here's how the peplum looks like just roughly before sewing. So now for this kissing pleat in the front, I mark the edges inside. As you can see, this is because I want to be able to join that point properly, so my pleat doesn't open as I sew on the skirt. So I'm going to join by about 0.25 inches vertically, and that was a quick one. And then once I did that, it was easy for me to pin it back on my skirt and then just start sewing from there. So that's it. So now I'm going to start sewing. I start sewing from the center to the side, and from the center, when I finish with that one side, I move back again from the center to the other side. So as I'm sewing, I'm removing the pins. It's pretty simple. So this is how I do my basic pencil skirts, and how, if you want to attach a peplum with pleats, just make sure the excesses are cut accordingly. In my next video, I'm going to be showing you how I cut a curved waistband and how I attach it to my skirt. So thank you for watching, and if you haven't subscribed, don't forget to do that so you get notifications whenever I post a new video. Thank you for watching.